Okay, so welcome to the second week or the first live week of teaching, should I say. And this week we're going to be talking about balancing blood sugar, eating habits and food sensitivities. So any of you who did the challenge that I did not so long ago, the free balancing blood sugar for weight loss challenge, some of this will be a repeat. It will be more in depth, so there will be more to it than what we went through during the challenge. Just so, yeah, obviously, just so you're all aware that there's kind of more to it than what we did there. It's a little bit more complex. So this is what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at why blood sugar balancing is important. We're going to look at foods that cause blood sugar imbalances, foods that improve blood sugar balance, how to balance your plate, looking at eating habits and food sensitivities. We'll then be looking at the Q&As, anything that's cropped up. If you've got any questions, just let me know. And then also we'll be doing the measurements and weight session as well. So kind of just checking in and getting your recordings now before we start changing everything. So that we can log everything. And as like I said, if we've got questions you go through, pop them in the chat and I will make sure I get to them at the end. Right, okay. There we are. So if we look at why blood sugar balancing is important for weight loss, it is key to overall health, not just for weight loss. If you want to get that Hashimoto's under control, then you need to balance your blood sugar. Poorly balanced blood sugar increases inflammation, not just in the gut, but kind of throughout your whole system. So it is really important to get it under control. It increases both the release of cortisol and insulin, which disrupts the production of other hormones. And this includes your thyroid hormones as well. Your whole endocrine system is linked to your hormone system. So if one is out of balance, it will knock on to the others. And this is going to lead to a lower level of thyroid hormone production. It's going to decrease your metabolism and it's going to lead to weight gain. So that is why we want to be looking at balancing the blood sugar to start with. It is a key area when it comes to weight loss. So long-term inflammation due to poor blood sugar is a major contributor to the development of most chronic health conditions, such as autoimmune conditions, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, polycystic ovary syndrome, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, elevated. Okay. Oh, yeah. Did you lose connection there with me?
I lost connection there. Yeah.
Okay. Hoping the recording is going to still be okay. We're still recording. Let me just check. Yes, we are. We are recording. It's still live streaming. So hopefully everything's okay. So I'll carry on and hopefully that doesn't happen again. I don't know why it did that. So basically inflammation is behind a lot of chronic health issues. It is a major contributor to most things like MS, things like rheumatoid arthritis, as well as Hashimoto's. So it is something that we do want to look at getting it under control. Okay. So if we look here, look at the chart of basically how that blood sugar balance works when it's not as it should be. So if you're starting off with an unbalanced meal, or you're starting off with lots of stress, or you're starting off with stimulants such as coffee, you're going to spike your blood sugar. It's going to be higher than it should be, than what your body likes, and we'll get to that in a second of what that should be. But this increases insulin production in order for the insulin to remove the excess sugar from your bloodstream and get it into your cells. If the cells can't use it straight away, it is then stored as fat. And this is where that weight gain comes in. It can also cause increased mood swings, increased brain fog. And then when it crashes, once that insulin has basically got the excess out of the blood sugar, it does it too quickly and it often ends up dropping too low. And this is when cortisol is then released. Cortisol is inflammatory, but the job of the cortisol is to release the sugar back into the bloodstream from the cells. And now what it'll be releasing tends to be the sugar that's readily available, not that's been stored as fat. So it's not touching your fat reserve, but it's releasing the sugar that's available immediately. It's going to increase your cravings so that you start to crave those sugary foods in order to get that quick hit of energy for your body. It increases your fatigue and can end up as chronic fatigue if this goes on long term. And obviously, again, it contributes to that brain fog and the weight gain again. So you can see the mess that you end up in if it's kind of constantly going up and down, and actually staying in the range that it should be. It basically ends up with a lot of symptoms and poor health as a result, and weight gain being one of those issues. So eating inflammatory foods or even drinks that spike your blood sugar increases cortisol production and results in high blood sugar levels. The bloodstream only likes about 4 grams of sugar in the bloodstream at any one time. So any more than this, and it triggers the release of insulin to remove that excess sugar, like I mentioned. That insulin then shuttles that sugar into the cells where it can be used immediately, or then get stored as fat if it can't be used straight away. And the more this goes on, the more fat gets stored, the more basically overloaded the cells become. If the insulin is constantly knocking on the door to the cells and saying, we need you to take more sugar, we need you to take more sugar, and it can't be used immediately, your cells start to become fatigued and start kind of ignoring this signal. It increases the amount of insulin that needs to be produced in order to keep this process going. And this is when insulin resistance and prediabetes start to kind of rear their heads. So if this continues continually, it leads to excess weight gain, basically. So we want to break that cycle. It can also be responsible for many other symptoms as well. So brain fog, fatigue, mood swings, tremors and shaking, cravings, hunger, afternoon energy dips and crashes, dizzy spells, blurred vision, headaches, skin tags, yeast infections, poor wound healing, increased thirst, increased urination. So tingling, pins and needles in your extremities, so in your hands, your feet, and kind of dark skin patches as well. And these often occur on where there's folds in the skin, so quite often in the neck. Kind of you'll notice it kind of along the lines in your neck, on your arms, kind of under your armpits, those kind of areas. And these are just some of the symptoms. It's not all of them, but they're the most common ones. So if we have a look at the foods that spike the blood sugar levels, there's quite a few of them, and they tend to be the sugar, the sugary drinks, fruit juices, so things like orange juice. Sweeteners are just as bad as the sugar. So if you're switching to diet drinks or diet kind of products in order to avoid the sugar, they are just as bad. They get the same end result. There's a slightly different pathway by which they get there, but it has the same ultimate result with the kind of blood sugar imbalance, and the weight gain. So things that are made from white flours, so white grains, so cakes, biscuits, sweets, pastries, tarts, quiches, white pasta, white noodles, white bread, white wraps, white bagels, white rice, then things like white chocolate, milk chocolate, potatoes without the skins hold the fibre, so when there is no fibre there, the potato is quickly converted into sugar. Because they're very starchy. We've got also the breakfast cereals that tend to be made from those refined grains again. And basically any carbohydrate that you're eating is going to turn to sugar in the bloodstream. If it's been refined and had the fibre removed, it's going to do that very quickly. If the fibre is still intact, then it's slower to do that and it's more controllable. So we want to be getting rid of the white products and looking at more of the whole grains wherever possible. And then we want to be looking at balancing it, which we'll look at in a second. So other things, jams, obviously honey, maple syrup are natural sugars, but they still are sugars. They do contain helpful nutrients, but they are still sugar at the end of the day. So you don't want to be just swapping directly out your sugar for things like honey and maple syrup in the same quantities. You want to be trying to reduce those things. Caffeinated drinks, again, they are stimulants. They stimulate that cortisol production and basically that blood sugar imbalance. Fruit and dried fruit, you'll notice there is asterisks aside of both of those, and that is because they contain huge amounts of nutrients, antioxidants. They've got good levels of fibre in them, so we don't want to avoid them, but we want to be looking at how we eat them sensibly so that we're not spiking the blood sugar. So now we've had a look at the foods that spike the blood sugar, let's have a look at those that slow the process down. And we do want to slow it down. We don't want to stop it. It is a necessary process. It's how food is converted into energy so that our cells can use it. So the problem becomes an issue when there is too much sugar that floods the bloodstream and the cells can't use all of it. So instead they store it as fat for future use. It's about finding that right balance and getting it in the right place so that you're not causing that inflammation and the excess cortisol, the excess insulin. So if you restrict your calories to counteract this process and to kind of try and lose weight, instead of using stored fat and converting it back to sugar for energy, if that cells start to think you're in starvation mode and they cling to that fat for use in emergencies, so they stop converting it back. And anything that you then introduce after that basically then gets stored as well, and you start to break down your muscle and your other tissues instead and use these proteins as an energy source. So this is where when people are experiencing muscle weakness, this is quite often a common basically result of this process. If you're not getting enough nutrition in, enough of those calories in, your body will start to store those calories that you do get in for emergency use, and it will start to break down your own muscle and tissue to use that as an energy source instead. We want to avoid that wherever possible. So we're going to look in a little bit about kind of getting that whole calorie counting idea out of our heads and looking at the right foods instead. So this is what a balanced blood sugar should look like. It looks a little bit different to the kind of out of control, like roller coaster that we looked at before. So when you're eating the right foods and you're drinking the right drinks with the right foods, then you are going to have a more balanced blood sugar level. You're going to remain within that 4 milligrams per deciliter of blood sugar. It's going to decrease your fat storage, so help you lose that weight. It's going to stabilize your mood and your energy. It's going to reduce your insulin requirement. It's going to reduce cortisol levels, so that's going to reduce your inflammation, as cortisol can drive your inflammation up. It's going to reduce your cravings, so you're not going to constantly fighting kind of what your body's telling you want to eat and what it needs, basically. And you're going to be able to think clearer, so that brain fog will be much better. So when you're balancing blood sugar and keeping it between that range, as I mentioned, that 4 grams per deciliter at any one time, it's going to help you reduce that insulin production. What did you say? So let's just put something in the comments. Let me have a look. You can't see the slides? No, okay. Well done, Helen. Let me just get rid of that and I will see what's going on. If it may have stopped sharing. Share screen. Okay. So have you just been looking at my screensaver?
I'm just looking directly at you.
Okay. Has that come up now?
Come up now, yeah.
Okay. You will get a copy of the slide, so you will be able to see that as well. But yeah, sorry about that. Let me just go back to that kind of. So if we're looking at there we are. If we're looking at that blood sugar roller coaster diagram, that's what it looks like when it's out of control, basically. And you can see in the red boxes here what it's causing, the issues that it's causing that I discussed before. Okay, and then that is what it should be looking like, basically. It should be within that range and reducing those symptoms you're experiencing, reducing that fat storage, reducing cortisol levels, reducing insulin levels, reducing cravings, and basically stopping that inflammatory process. It drives inflammation and we want to stop that. So, okay, so let's have a look. Where was I? So basically reducing that insulin means that there isn't a constant flow of excess sugar being dragged into the cells and stored as fat when it can't be used there and then. So basically cortisol levels are kept in check, which helps your adrenal function and your other hormone production, as I mentioned before, so your thyroid hormones, your sex hormones. Basically, if cortisol levels are high and constantly high, then it steals the building blocks that are needed to make your other hormones, basically. So it ends up with lower levels of thyroid hormone production, lower levels of things like estrogen and progesterone being produced, and it causes absolute havoc. It's also going to help lower inflammation, which is hugely beneficial for calming your autoimmune response. So getting that blood sugar in check is really important. So you can expect to see improvements in the following when blood sugar is well managed. So increased energy, reduced brain fog, more balanced moods, no hunger or cravings, no feeling hangry, no tremors and dizzy spells. The thirst and urination start to decrease. The blurry vision starts to improve. The skin tags and the discolored skin can start to disappear. And obviously that weight starts to move as well, which is what we're looking at when obviously in the program, that's our main aim. But all of this is beneficial. What we're doing is not going to just help with the weight loss. It's going to help with a lot of your symptoms as well. So not only that, but you can expect to see improvements in a lot of your blood markers. So your cholesterol levels, your triglycerides, your pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes markers, such as your fasting blood glucose, the HbA1c, uric acid, and things like improved liver function testing, improved kidney function tests. So it can have a quite profound impact on your overall health, getting that under control. So foods that will slow the blood sugar spike down. So we're looking at your protein, your fiber, and your healthy fats, basically. All three of these take longer to digest and to pass through the digestive tract. So they don't release huge amounts of sugar to the bloodstream all at once like those carbohydrates do. It's a much more controlled and sustained release. So it's still doing that process, but it's much more controlled. It keeps it within the range rather than shooting it through the roof and then crashing it through the floor again. So protein-rich foods, we want to be looking at meat, organ meats, fish, eggs. Dairy is a good source, but I've put an asterisk there as we will be discussing that when we get to the food sensitivity side of things. Shellfish is another good source of protein, raw nuts and seeds, and you want them to be raw rather than cooked and roasted, as the structure of the fats within them get changed when they're processed, basically when they're fried and roasted. And this can basically, your body starts to identify them more as a toxin than actually something that is helpful to your system. So I always advise raw nuts and seeds. And if you are going to cook them yourself, if you're going to roast them, make sure you're doing it really gently, so you're not heating them to such a high heat that it changes the structure. So beans, so things like chickpeas, things like lima beans, kidney beans, all of those kind of things, green beans, runner beans, all of kind of that family. Pulses, so your lentils, and then sweater grains as well. So things like quinoa and buckwheat have a lot of protein in them as well. So yes, they do have some carbs in them, but they also have a good source of protein in them. Okay, so when we're looking at fiber, we want to be looking at whole grains rather than the white refined grains. So we want to be looking at kind of brown rice rather than white rice. You can also look at kind of wild rice, black rice, red rice as well. So it doesn't just have to be the brown rice. I personally really enjoy the taste of the red rice. It's got a really nice nutty flavour to it. So things like brown bread, whole grain flours, wherever possible. So avoiding those that have been processed and the fiber's been removed from, basically. If it's white, then the fiber's been removed. So beans and pulses, again, really helpful. So your chickpeas, your lentils, your kind of runner beans, kind of kidney beans, all that kind of stuff. You can also use the beans and pulses as flours in pastas, for wraps and noodles as well. I quite enjoy the split pea pasta. And yeah, there's lots of different, like the noodles, you can get different noodles made from like lentils and all sorts of things. So there is a lot of variety out there, and that's what we want to be looking at doing, is getting that variety in. So again, nuts and seeds are a good source of fiber, and again, raw root vegetables. So anything that grows below the ground, so potatoes, carrots, parsnips, swedes, turnips, all those kind of things are good kind of sources of fiber, as are most vegetables and fruit. All vegetables and fruit have fiber in them, so they are a good source of fiber. Which is why I was saying before, we don't want to cut fruit out. Yes, it has sugar in there, but it has also a lot of other stuff that we do want, so we don't want to be missing out, basically. The healthy fats. Now, a lot of people tend to avoid fat as they associate fat with weight gain. It's not the fat that causes the weight gain. It is the sugar and the white refined carbs that tend to cause the weight gain, the processed foods. So we want to be avoiding those and making sure we're getting good levels of healthy fats. Those healthy fats are essential for your brain health, for your nerve cell conduction and communication. They're essential for making your hormones. And also for all your cells, the walls of your cells are kind of made up of fat. So you want that healthy fat to make those cell walls and not unhealthy fats. So things like the oily fish, which contain good levels of omega-3, so salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, herring, and trout. Salmon and trout particularly, I would go for wild caught or organic, as they tend to have an issue with mites, and if they are not organic and they are farmed, they use a lot of pesticides in order to control the mite issue. So if that puts it out of your price range when it comes to salmon and trout, go for the mackerel, the anchovies, the sardines, etc. They are much cheaper and they have good levels of the omega-3s in there. You can get your omega-3s from bigger oily fish as well, such as tuna and swordfish and things like that. However, they get the omega-3 from the smaller fish, so it's more concentrated in the smaller fish. You want to be trying to aim for the smaller fish. They don't have the issues with things like high levels of mercury and stuff that you quite often get with the larger fish. Other healthy fats, avocado, olive oil. Olives are a good thing as well to snack on. Coconut oil, coconut milk, cream and yogurt, raw nuts, raw seeds, animal fats as well, especially for cooking. Any fat that is solid at room temperature, so coconut oil and animal fats, are much better to cook with than your liquid fats. And that is because they withstand the temperatures much better. They don't get distorted, so your body doesn't then see it as a toxin instead of something that it can use basically. So cooking with coconut oil is great. Cooking with animal fats such as duck fat, goose fat, beef fat, all of those kind of things can be used for cooking. My husband does some really nice duck fat roast potatoes, which are great. So we want to be avoiding basically the refined inflammatory oil. So the things like the canola oil, sunflower oil, they don't withstand temperature very well, so they're not great for cooking. If you're going to use them cold pressed and use them for dressings, but don't have predominant amounts of your oil from that source. They are more inflammatory. The oils here are much less inflammatory, they actually have anti-inflammatory properties. Olive oil can be used for cooking. You'll notice if you leave it on the side in a cooler environment, it will start to harden. Some of it will solidify and some of it will be liquid. That's because it has quite a good level of saturated fat in, so it will withstand the heat as long as you're not making it smoke when you're cooking with it. It should be absolutely fine. Okay, so if we look at how to balance your plate, now we know which foods you should be kind of avoiding and which ones you should be including to balance your blood sugar. You need to combine these foods. So you need to make sure you're having protein, fiber, and healthy fats with every meal and every snack. So you need to swap out the white refined products for whole grain options. Most people I speak to are trying to lose weight or maintain their weight are focusing on reducing portion sizes and are counting calories instead of looking at the right foods in the right proportions. Okay. Did you lose me again there, Emma?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've got a storm front coming in. It's messing with the internet at the moment, so I'm hoping it's going to hold off. So, okay. Sorry about that. There's not a lot I can do.
Again, just
Sorry?
the slides are.
They've
We'll
gone.
need to.
Okay. That must have been what happened, I think, last time as well. So, yeah. It's strange because it picks the recording back up and the live streaming, but obviously it doesn't like continuing with the slides. So how's that? Is that okay?
Something. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so right, where were we? Okay, so if you're focusing on those calories instead of the right foods, it can encourage your system to hang on to every single calorie you consume when it can, like I mentioned before. So you end up giving into the hunger and the cravings, basically, which you will if your blood sugar isn't balanced. It's going to be more than willpower. You're not going to be able to withhold when it comes to those cravings because it's basically your body's physiology craving those foods that are going to give you that energy hit, and starting to store those calories as fat, and increasing your weight gain. So we want to forget about the calories and focus on the right foods in the right proportions. This is what is going to help you calm the inflammation. It's going to help you calm the autoimmune side of things and help you drop the weight as well. And it should be effortless and sustainable. When I switched over my diet, within 2 months of switching my diet, I dropped 3 dress sizes. And I was probably eating more than I'd eaten previously, but I was just eating the right foods in the right combinations. So when you get this right, it can be pretty quick and pretty easy. So I'm hoping that it's going to be that way for you. Some people are a little bit slower to get started if there's other things going on, if there's kind of liver function issues going on, if there's hormone imbalances going on. And we're going to look at all of that as we go through the program, which is why it's all included, because there can be more complications to weight than just kind of the right food. So that's why I want to include it all, so that you're fully informed on what can be triggering that kind of weight gain and how you can start getting rid of it, basically. So once you've conned that information, not only should that weight start to fall off, but your other symptoms should start to improve as well. So this is what a balance plate should look like. So you've got here on the left, you have your half a plate of non-starchy vegetables and fruit. So anything that grows above ground, basically, any of your green veggies, things like tomatoes, aubergines, asparagus, your fruits, broccoli, any of those things that are going to be classed as kind of that half of your plate. You want then to be looking on the other side, you want to at least a quarter of your plate being protein. And you can probably push that further when you're trying to lose weight as well. So definitely looking at things like your fish, looking at meat, like we said before, shellfish, making sure you're getting a good variety. So getting eggs in there, getting those legumes in there as well. So making sure you're getting a wide range of different proteins in there. And your pseudo grains as well, like I said before, the buckwheat and the quinoa have good levels of protein in. I have put them down down in the starchy section, but they also do have protein in them. So it is something that you can bulk up the protein amount as well. And then you want to be getting about a quarter or less of your plate of starchy veg. So anything that grows below ground. So your potatoes, sweet potato, carrots, parsnips, swede, turnips, all of those things should be making up less than a quarter of your plate. Beetroot crosses over a little bit. It is starchy, but it has less starch than some of your other root vegetables. So you can have it on your, you can have more of that if you want. And it is great for, it's great for liver support as well. So I try not to limit that so much. And then you want 1 to 2 tablespoons of healthy fats as a rough guide, and making sure you are getting those in there from, like I said, from the sources before, the avocado, coconut, all those kind of things, nuts, seeds. So again, you'll get a copy of the slides so you can see this. You can print this page out if you want and stick it up so you know what your plate should look like. And if you're snacking, trying to stick to the same principles as well. If you're having a snack, where is your protein, where is your fiber coming from, and kind of where is the healthy fat coming from, so that you know that you're not going to be spiking your blood sugar. So for example, if you're having a piece of fruit as a snack mid-afternoon, what can you have with it that is going to stabilize that blood sugar? Could it be a handful of raw nuts? Could you have some rice cakes or buckwheat cakes with some peanut butter on, and kind of a banana? Yeah, just looking at the different things. Could you have hummus, which is obviously chickpeas, high in protein, with some crudités? Just looking at what you can get in there to basically make sure you're getting those foods that are going to balance your blood sugar. So we're going to look at eating habits now. It's a fairly quick section, but it is very important. So how and when you eat is just as important as what you eat. If you're eating on the go, or if you're eating when you're distracted and you're kind of bolting your food down, it impairs the digestive process. And we will start to go into this more on next week when we're looking at gut health and actually exactly how it works. So, but basically your body fails to release the digestive juices that are needed to break your food down and to extract those nutrients to make sure that they're absorbed correctly. So when you're eating kind of in that rush, and when you're stressed, eating on the go, distracted, eating really quickly, it's going to impair this digestive process. It causes inflammation, it causes leaky gut, which causes then inflammation outside of the gut. It increases that autoimmune activity, and it leads to weight gain as a result, because of all that inflammation is then triggering cortisol release, and kind of then that whole imbalance cycle of blood sugar starts to take effect again. So we want to slow down, and we want to basically make sure we're eating right. So chewing your food thoroughly is really, really important. So the advice is 20 to 30 times per mouthful, and that might seem like a lot. But if you're kind of chewing your food 2 or 3 times and then swallowing it down, it's going to be in a far bigger kind of portion than it should be. Your stomach doesn't have teeth. It's got to then break it down, and it's going to find it incredibly difficult if you're just kind of gulping food down. So you do need to make sure you are chewing as much as possible, so it's going down in a smoother texture, so your rest of your digestive tract has less work to do. Limit distractions when you're eating. Try not to eat in front of the TV or with your phone in your hand. And I know that can be quite difficult, especially if you've got families and you tend to all sit together and watch your TV. Trying to sit to the table if you can, make a game out of, like, put the phone in the box, the first person to pick the phone up basically washes the dishes, whatever it is, kind of to get everybody on board doing that, or those who kind of stick to the game get a reward at the end of the week, or whatever it is. If you've got kids, they quite like things when they're made into a game. So, and things like not eating on the go or rushing your food down, sitting at your desk and eating your meal and carrying on working. You're not focusing on your food, you are focusing on what other things. It means that digestive process isn't happening as it should do. So try and take your lunch break. It will actually make you more productive. So that time away from your desk, you're not going to lose time with your work. It'll mean that you can do more in less time when you actually are at your desk because you've had that break. So savour your food as well. This is really important when you're cooking and you can smell that food cooking, anticipate how good it's going to be, what it's going to taste like. And then obviously when you're eating it as well, enjoying that food. This all helps the release of those digestive enzymes in your mouth, and it triggers the release of the digestive enzymes elsewhere, which helps break everything down and get it absorbed as it should do. Try not to eat when you're stressed. So 5 to 6 deep, slow belly breaths before eating can help switch you onto your digest response rather than your stress response. And I am going to be going into this in a lot more detail when we deal with stress. But these are just kind of some quick tips to get you changing your habits now to make sure your digestive process is in the right state to receive that food, so that you're not kind of doing all that good work with changing what you eat, only to kind of be tripped up by how you're eating it, basically. Okay, so that was it when it comes to eating habits. We're now going to look at food sensitivities. So the first up is gluten. And if you've been in my group for any length of time, you will have noticed me banging on about gluten quite a lot and how those with autoimmune disease are best kind of avoiding it. The protein in gluten upregulates zonulin in the gut, and this zonulin opens the tight junctions in the gut wall. So if you think of the tight junctions as gates between your cells, when that zonulin level increases because of the gluten, the gates start to open when they shouldn't open, basically. And this results in leaky gut, and it allows food particles to pass through into the bloodstream where they shouldn't be, microbes and pathogens to pass through into the bloodstream where they shouldn't be. It causes inflammation, not only in the gut, but obviously systemically once it's in your bloodstream. And your immune system then has to tag everything that's been released into the bloodstream and take it to your liver for processing to get it out of there and for it to be eliminated, basically. This puts a huge burden on your immune system, and it means it's doing a lot of work and is starting to get kind of constantly triggered. This can result in molecular mimicry, where the gluten protein can be very similar to proteins within your own tissue. For example, the thyroglobulin in your thyroid is very similar to the protein in the gluten, and your immune system starts to create antibodies against your own thyroid as well as against the gluten that's in the wrong place. And basically this results in that autoimmune disease, that autoimmune process, and increases your symptoms. So gluten is one that basically most of those with autoimmune conditions do better without because of how it triggers that process. Dairy, as I said before, we would talk about this when it came to food sensitivities. It has a very similar process as gluten. The protein in this case is called casein, and it causes inflammation within the gut. It also increases that zonulin, causes basically those tight junctions, those gates to open, the same as the gluten does. It results in the leaky gut, the upregulated immune system. That molecular mimicry can also occur. And the result is basically autoimmune disease, or that continued autoimmune process. Dairy is also often a trigger for other symptoms such as arthritic symptoms, MS. It can make symptoms worse of MS, eczema. It can trigger worsening eczema, and a lot of sinus issues as well. So if you struggle with kind of sinus headaches or kind of that pain in your face, the blocked or running sinuses, dairy can be a major contributor of this. And also it can make you quite sensitive to those external pollutants, so things that like the pollens and things like that you start to become more sensitive to. So I do find that most, again, do better without the dairy. Dairy doesn't tend to trigger the same gut issues as gluten. So quite often most people will say, oh, well, I'll keep the gluten out of there, but the dairy isn't an issue for me. Not realizing that actually it can be causing other symptoms that probably haven't kind of on your radar because you've just assumed it only causes the gut symptoms. Okay, so soy. Soy contains something called goitrogens, and this affects the uptake of iodine into the thyroid. So basically, the goitrogens within the soy block they compete and block the iodine receptors that take the iodine into the thyroid. The iodine is needed for thyroid hormone production. So your T4 hormone has 4 iodine molecules attached. Your T3 hormone has 3 iodine molecules attached. So you need the iodine directly to make your thyroid hormones. If the goitrogens within the soy are blocking the receptors that take the iodine into thyroid, it means that you're going to have reduced thyroid hormone production because you don't have sufficient iodine getting in there. Most goitrogens can be deactivated, so you will find them in other things. You'll find them in kind of your legumes, so your beans and pulses. You'll also find them in your dark green vegetables. Now, when you cook these, those goitrogens break down, so they are absolutely fine to eat, and even raw when it comes to the green veggies, as long as you're not having tons and tons of like raw greens in juices every day, they don't tend to be a problem. However, the goitrogens in the soy do not break down when they're cooked. So that is a problem that you can't get around it by just cooking them. Soy also lowers thyroid peroxidase enzyme activity, and your thyroid peroxidase enzyme helps make your thyroid hormones. So basically, if you've got this receptors being blocked and you've got reduced thyroid peroxidase enzyme activity from the intake of soy, it means that you're going to have lower levels of thyroid hormone production, which is going to increase your hypothyroid symptoms. And one of those obviously is weight gain. So it is generally best avoided, or at least limited if it can't be avoided. So my recommendations when it comes to Hashimoto's or any other autoimmune condition is that gluten and dairy be avoided, and that hypothyroidism, if you have it, then soy is best avoided as well. And just because you only have hypothyroidism doesn't mean that you can consume tons and tons of gluten and dairy as well, because it is still producing that leaky gut effect that you're having, which is an autoimmune trigger. So you want to be avoiding that, even if you don't have an official Hashimoto's diagnosis. Some people do have the Hashimoto's diagnosis. Other people have never been tested for it, aren't even aware that quite often Hashimoto's is the cause of hypothyroidism. So those 3 tend to be kind of best avoided if possible. So my advice would be to read your labels when you're going gluten and dairy free. Look at the ingredients that are on there and go for your products that are kind of more natural. So your meat, your fish, shellfish, vegetables that don't have any ingredients. And then when you are looking at products that have ingredient lists, looking for those that have the minimal lists and trying to get those with the minimal ingredients. If you've got 2 products in front of you and one has a huge list of ingredients, you don't know what they are, go for the one with the smaller list. And obviously nowadays within Europe, they are required to highlight the allergens in there. So gluten, dairy should be highlighted if it's in there. So whether it's kind of put in bold, whether it's underlined, whatever they do, it should be highlighted. Also, when you're going gluten and dairy free, don't automatically go for the free from products. They can be just as bad at causing that leaky gut as the gluten and the dairy can. They are heavily processed. They are high in sugar. They have a lot of preservatives and additives. They have a lot of emulsifiers and gums in there, and a lot of those refined white flours as well. So all of these cause inflammation. The emulsifiers and gums tend to cause leaky gut themselves, as do a lot of the preservatives. Sugar obviously causes that leaky gut as well because of the inflammation it causes. So we want to be trying to avoid those free from products and go for natural alternatives, which is why I put the Hashimoto's Healthy Eating Recipe ebook together. All the recipes in there are naturally gluten, dairy, and soy free. So none of them use any of the gluten-free flours. They're all using the kind of naturally gluten-free flours that don't have any gluten in and haven't been refined at all. It's why I created it, so that you don't have to basically guess what you should and shouldn't be eating. Okay, so when we're looking at natural gluten-free alternatives, things like your flours and pastas made from nuts, made from seeds, made from legumes, so chickpea, lentil, split pea. Split pea is one of my favorites when it comes to pasta. It's got a lovely earthy texture to it and it holds its shape quite well as long as you don't overcook it. Buckwheat, again, is not an actual grain, it is a seed related to the rhubarb family. So that is a great alternative, and you can quite often find noodles and pastas and rice and wraps made from buckwheat. So it's a good alternative. Brown rice, red rice, wild rice, any of those kind of things are a better option. Amaranth, millet, sorghum, quinoa are all great natural gluten-free grains, and pseudo grains. Oats, if you are celiac, can be a bit tricky. You would need to look for gluten-free oats as the protein is very similar, and there can also be a lot of cross-contamination with processing. So I find I can't do oats at all. Even I am celiac and I can't do them at all. Even a small amount of the gluten-free oats can trigger me because the protein structure is very similar between the oats and the actual gluten. So teff and buckwheat again. And then also if you're looking at soy sauce replacement, then coconut aminos are a great alternative. It doesn't contain gluten, it doesn't contain soy, and it'll give you the same kind of effect as soy sauce does. Okay, when it comes to natural dairy-free alternatives, so your plant-based milks, so made from nuts, seeds, oat, coconut, obviously avoiding the soy. Vegan cheeses, again, are a good option, but make sure you're checking the labels for additives. Some are way better than others. Some are just basically fermented nuts with the live cultures that they've used to ferment them. Others have a huge list of kind of additives, colorings, all sorts of things in there that you don't really want to be eating. And some of them are not made from nuts at all. They are made from refined oils, such as your canola oil and sunflower oil. So you definitely want to be avoiding those ones and going for the actual better options. In the UK, I think there is a company called I Am Not Okay, and they have a good selection of vegan cheeses on there. And most of the supermarkets now have some kind of choice. Okay, coconut yogurt is a good choice. I have this for my breakfast, for my fruit and my nuts and seeds, my nut butter in the mornings. So it's a good alternative to your kind of dairy yogurts. It doesn't contain the protein that dairy yogurt does, though, so don't think you're directly replacing the protein content. So that's the same for your plant-based milks and the vegan cheeses. If they're made from nuts, you will get a good amount of protein from. Your plant-based milks, if they're made from nuts and seeds, you'll get protein from, but if it's made from the oat and coconut, not so much. Coconut cream, again, is another alternative to normal cream. You also want to make sure when you're basically cutting that dairy out that you're replacing the calcium in there. If dairy is your main source of calcium, then you need to make sure you are actively replacing that. Green leafy vegetables actually have more calcium in them than dairy products, so they are a great source of calcium. Nuts and seeds such as sesame, pumpkin, and sunflower, as well as peanuts, have a good source of calcium. Sprouted seeds, again, are great for calcium, as are salmon and sardines and herring with the bones still in. Let's have a look. And then your beans and pulses, so your legumes, again, they can have a good source of a good quantity of calcium in there. However, they do contain something called phytates, which can block the absorption of those nutrients such as your iron, your calcium, zinc. So you need to make sure when you are having those that you are cooking them so that they're quite soft. So it breaks those phytates down, stops the interference with the absorption of those nutrients. Okay, that was a lot, I know. So have you got any questions, Emma?
Hi. Yeah, I was just kind of jotting things down. So a lot of the gluten-free products seem really processed.
Yep, they are hugely processed. And it's something I didn't realise when I was celiac. I suppose initially when I was diagnosed with celiac, there wasn't a lot of gluten-free products around, so I didn't have a huge amount of choice. And even when they became available, I probably didn't eat as much as I probably would have done had I been diagnosed later and they were readily available because I'd got used to not having them. But I still had things like bread and yeah, kind of pasta replacements, and I couldn't figure out why I was still having the symptoms that I was having, and when I wasn't consuming the gluten. And it was more than likely the actual ingredients within the free from products that were causing those symptoms, unfortunately.
So
They are
there's
easy, and I'm not saying don't ever have them. All I'm saying is make sure they're not a staple. If it's something like an emergency, you're going somewhere and you need kind of to take a sandwich with you or whatever, no problem. If it's an occasional thing, that's absolutely no problem, but just make sure it's not kind of an everyday, every meal kind of thing.
yeah, and the gluten-free soy sauce, no go or
Yeah, the gluten-free soy sauce. So it's tamari. Usually it's a Japanese soy sauce. The tamari doesn't have the gluten in, but it still has the soy in. So if you're avoiding the soy, then the coconut aminos are a much better option. If you don't mind a little bit of soy here and there, then again, as long as you're getting the gluten-free soy sauce, you should be fine.
yeah. I was told as well, somebody kind of said something about don't eat too much iodine or selenium.
Okay, we're going to get to that when we do the testing. We're going to talk about iodine and selenium when we get to that. My advice is don't avoid selenium-rich foods. I was told that, and I actually had an iodine deficiency. It made me much, much worse. So iodine deficiency can be a cause of hypothyroidism in the first place. So I would definitely say eat foods that contain iodine, so your seaweeds and also your fish and shellfish and things like that. Dairy has iodine, grass-fed beef tends to have iodine. I wouldn't supplement iodine unless you know you're deficient, is probably what the advice I would give. Get it in your diet, no problem. But yeah, don't supplement unless you know you are deficient. And then there is a strict protocol you have to follow if you are deficient. And I can talk to you about how you would know to test for an iodine deficiency, etc., when we get to a testing week.
And just in terms of butter, I know you were saying it should be solid at room temperature. Is there a preference over spreadable butter versus just your kind of block of butter?
Obviously butter is dairy, so I'd be advising to kind of skip the dairy. So unfortunately. At the moment, certainly while you're trying to lose the weight and trying to get back on top of the inflammation process and starting the recovery, if you want to explore further down the line, if you can tolerate a little bit of dairy here and there without it triggering your autoimmune stuff and symptoms and weight gain, then that's fine. But initially, I would say try and avoid it.
Yeah. And the decaffeinated coffee, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. And also, if you find that you just need that caffeinated coffee in the morning, then don't avoid having it, but make sure you have it at the same time as you're having food.
Oh yeah.
So that you're getting your protein, you're getting the fiber, you're getting the healthy fats. So it's not a stimulant on its own, which is going to shoot blood sugar through the roof. If you're combining it with those things, then it's going to slow that process down.
Yeah. And just for inflammatory foods, somebody mentioned about eggs.
Okay.
They,
Eggs is a personal, there's no data that or research that I've come across that directly links eggs as an inflammatory issue when it comes to autoimmunity and Hashimoto's. So what I would say is that's a personal sensitivity. If you notice you react when you have eggs, then obviously don't have them. But if you don't, eggs have excellent nutrition. So I would say, yeah, definitely keep them in there if you can. It makes, especially breakfast and things like that, lunches much easier. Personally for me, I can't do particularly egg whites, and it may be same for some of you. May find that it may be one part of the egg and not the other that you have a problem with. For me, egg whites will trigger symptoms. Egg yolks I can get away with, as long as I don't have them very often.
yeah.
So
In terms of symptoms, I find it very hard to know if I have an issue with particular foods.
okay.
So
What I would say is make the changes we've discussed. And quite often,
yeah,
a lot of the issues, digestive issues, things like that, the kind of bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, those kind of things tend to clear up. And you'll find
Yeah.
that foods that maybe were an issue before no longer are,
Yeah.
once you've
I'd
got
say
the majority of foods out of there.
I would only suffer out of those the bloating.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would
So
say
that
make those changes. And then once you've been doing that for a while, if you're still having the bloating, then yes, I would look at maybe taking the eggs out and seeing if it makes a difference. But I would also be looking at things like stomach acid levels, which again we'll talk about when we get to the gut health section, because that can cause bloating in and of itself. If you don't have sufficient amount of stomach acid, you find it very difficult to break the foods down, and that can cause inflammation and bloating.
okay. Okay. Yeah, that's all my questions.
Okay, perfect. Right, so what I'm going to do now is, Emma, as you're the only one here, I'm going to get your weights and measurements,
Oh,
and then I'll make sure I get Marion's and Federica's as well during the week, so we can keep a track of everything. I will calculate your BMI. I will calculate waist to hip ratio, waist to height ratio, so that I've got all that information. The scales aren't always the best way to measure weight. Quite often you'll notice body composition changes. So when you start to lose weight, and especially if you've been calorie restricting, you'll start to build that protein back up, those muscles back up, and that can be heavier than kind of the fat. So you might notice that scales don't change or that they actually go up. So this is why we look at actual measurements on your hips and waist. It's a better, more accurate way of looking at weight loss. And when we're looking at the waist to hip ratio and the waist to height ratio for women, probably the waist to height is the best identifier of whether you've got a healthy weight or not, because we tend to naturally go in, and the waist to hip ratio kind of works better generally for men. So, but I will be calculating all of those and tracking everything to make sure kind of everything's going in the right direction.
mm-hmm.
So what's your height, Emma?
163 centimeter.
Okay, 163 centimeters. And your current weight?
70 kg.
70 kg. Okay. Hips?
108 centimeter.
Okay. Waist?
87 centimeter.
87. Okay. Perfect. So I'll be keeping a track of that and seeing how we all get on with everything. And like I said, I will calculate those BMI, waist to hip, waist to height. I won't do that now, but what I would say is that we'll do during your food diary session, we'll look at your individual markers, so we can discuss kind of your ratios, and if you're over the kind of what is classed as a healthy waist to height ratio, or if you're over that, we can discuss that on that session.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Can I ask what your goal weight is? What did you put on that you put in the Facebook group at all?
My goal weight would be 55 kg.
55 kg. Okay.
Okay with 60.
Okay.
55.
Okay. And is there a specific amount you want to lose off hips and waist, or is it just mainly the weight that you've been looking at?
Definitely. My hips, like definitely.
Okay. So that's where you tend to carry most of it, is it?
Yeah, hips, upper legs, all that area.
Okay. Okay. Right. I've got all of those recorded, so we'll be monitoring that as we go through. Have we got anything else? Right. Last bit is homework. So what I want you to look at during this week, as I mentioned, you will get a copy of that Hashimoto's Healthy Eating Recipe ebook. Make sure you use that so that you're not having to try and think of everything from scratch for yourself. If you want to tweak the recipes, that's absolutely fine, but they are all naturally gluten, dairy, and soy free. They're all balanced so that they've got the protein in there, they've got the kind of healthy fats and the fibre, etc., in there that you need. So remove those inflammatory foods and replace them with blood sugar balancing foods. Look at balancing your plate, and that goes for your snacks and your meals. And I want you to share the pictures of your meals in the group so that you can get my feedback, so that I can see if there's anything that may be any area that you're going wrong with or tripping up. Anything that you're doing really well with, I'll make a note of that as well. Kind of say, yeah, this area is great, that area is great. You need to up your protein a little bit, just to give you that balance, so that you can get that feedback from me whilst you're making the changes, so that you know that you're doing it right.
Yeah.
Focusing on your eating habits before and practice them before your meals. Obviously removing the gluten, dairy, and soy with the help of the recipe book. And no, it sounds like a lot. If you're finding it a lot and overwhelming, make sure you use the group. Make sure you kind of get in touch with each other, get in touch with me if you've got any questions, and make sure you're booking your food diary analysis session in as well. Once you've got that 7 days completed for your food diary, get it back to me, email it back to me, and we can book your that session in for you.
Yeah.
How does that sound?
Good. Scary.
Scary. A lot. Yeah. So it is a lot, but it is worth doing, and it does make a big difference. I've certainly noticed a huge difference.
Yeah.
So I tried doing a lot of things on their own. I tried doing just gluten-free, just dairy-free. And yeah, I never really saw the results. And it wasn't until I kind of looked at them with balancing blood sugar and everything else where it all started to fall into place. Okay, so yeah, make sure you're sharing your meals every day this week in the group. So I mean, if it's, you don't have to do every meal if you don't want to, but kind of try and at least once a day pop a picture in there of what you're eating, and we can chat about it, and I can give any feedback that might be helpful.
Include like the breakfasts and the lunches, everything.
Yeah, and the recipe ebook's got breakfast recipes in there. It's got lunch recipes, a kind of soups, salads, fish dishes, meat dishes. It has sweet treats, snacks kind of in there, so it covers everything.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
And again, yeah, you can change things around a little bit if you don't have a certain ingredient, but you have something else that would work just as well. Then yeah, don't be rigid with it. Just make it work for you how best it fits with what kind of your lifestyle and everything.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Is that any other questions before I jump off, or are you happy with everything?
Oh no, that's good. Yeah, you've covered everything.
Excellent. Okay, right. Well, I will stop sharing that, and I will stop recording and streaming, and I will see you in the group in the week.
Okay. That's
Okay.
great.
Take
So
care.
much.
Bye.